We are very lucky and very fortunate to have with us Jenn Heringer, and are you the only female director in MLB?
No, there's Erica Ferrero is in Colorado. She's been doing it for several years. She was the only one for quite a while.
Mhm.
And then there's myself, and there's a couple other women that they don't do the majority of the season, but they do fill in. So, I mean, there's two of us that are the primary directors, and
Mhm.
then there's like a couple more that don't do quite as many games.
Yeah. Well, Jenn Heringer is one of the few
Yes.
females who are in the control room and calling the games. And that is, in and of itself, that's an art form. I don't care who you are, because you can rehearse all you want, you can go through everything you want, but once the game starts, as you all know who are on that side of it, once the game starts, you don't know where it's going. You don't know where the good shot's going to be. And it's one of these things that you have to call on the fly. And I had known about Jen, but I had not met her until this fall. We were on a panel together. And just to kind of hear her story and how she got involved in it is really, really fascinating. And I know that we have touched earlier this semester, we have talked a little bit about the changing face of baseball and the rights and the economics of it. And we were just talking about first the Reds' rights were owned by Bally, and then for a hot minute it was MLB, and now it's FanDuel. And then last week we found out that Major League Baseball and ESPN, this is going to be the last year. And there for a while, MLB was a big, big part of ESPN's programming. They paid a lot of money, even when I was there, they paid a lot of money to have a lot of programming around baseball. And over the years, and I think MLB looked at it and said, we're not getting the kind of exposure that we should have. And it's probably true because it's really Sunday night baseball right now, and this is it. So this will be the last year for that deal, unless, of course, they come up with a new deal. But the business of baseball is really, really in flux right now. And who's going to have those rights? And the teams that take in the rights, they take back those rights. What are they going to do with it? So we can talk a little bit about the economics of it, but I really want to talk about the nuts and bolts of putting an MLB game on the air and what it takes. And as I said, Jenn Heringer is one of the few women who are out there doing it for the entire season. And I wanted to catch her because, of course, we're in spring training right now, and she's going to be heading out to Arizona and working games out there because broadcasters and control rooms, they need to go through spring training too to get ready for the new season. So, Jan, I will turn it over to you and just have you talk about how you got into this business and how you worked your way up to where you are now. And as always, if any of you have questions, don't hesitate, jump in, and please, don't wait for me to call on you because I can't see everybody's names all at the same time. But please jump in and add your questions, and we'll talk about whatever aspect you want to. But as I've mentioned to Jen, we have a lot of finance and econ people in there, but we also have a lot of folks working in Fighting Irish Media who do this all the time, and they call games and they work games and they shoot games. And so it's a little bit of everything here. So Jen, I will turn it over to you and have you talk about just how you got started in this business and how you got into the control room for the Reds.
Sure. So my story started back in 1997. I was a student at Northern Kentucky University. Um, I should actually back it up 1 year prior to that, even before I graduated, I started working in local news. So I started working at a local news station, just, entry level position, worked there for about 3 months and then moved to another local news station. But then in 1997, I got the opportunity to do an internship for the Cincinnati Reds. At the time, it was Synergy Field, former Riverfront Stadium when I started there. I started as an intern for we call it the scoreboard department, but the in-house, a lot of people lovingly know it as the Jumbotron. So I started down that path. So I got a great opportunity for an internship, started in there. Again, my intern year was a lot of just basic production, pulling cables for a handheld camera on the field, helping get, excuse me, get things set up. And then from there, I never left. So I'm about to start my 28th season working Reds games. But one thing you'll find from many people that work in our field is you kind of have parallel paths to get to like doing live sports as like your full-time job. So I continued working in local news while also interning and then becoming a freelance production person throughout the summer, excuse me, when the Reds were in season. So I was kind of doing both things. So um, essentially, when I started at news, again, I did everything. I started out running a teleprompter, stage managing, did cameras, went on to do graphics, and then eventually I started directing weekend news broadcasts. So that's how I got into directing first, while at the same time continuing to work every summer for Reds baseball. Same kind of pathway. Started out as camera operator, moved into graphics, and then when we moved to the new stadium, I was a technical director and then eventually a director. So I was the main in-house entertainment scoreboard director. I was there for a total of 18 seasons, but my last 10 were as director. So that kind of is how I got introduced into live sports. It started as in-house. In 2013, it was Fox Sports at the time. They built a studio for their road games. So when the team would be playing on the road, their pre and post game shows used to originate from the venue that they were playing at. They built these studios so that they could then do their pre and post game shows remotely from a studio in Cincinnati. So when that studio opened, I got the opportunity to then start working road games. I was employed by Fox Sports at the time as a freelancer. So again, same similar path. I started out as graphics, and then I was technical director, and then I started directing the pre and post game shows. About 2018, I got an opportunity to move. We call it move to the truck, move downstairs for the actual live game broadcast. I felt like I had kind of reached my peak of where I could go in the scoreboard department. There really wasn't anywhere else to go for me. So there was a, excuse me, there was a position available. It was called a libero. I don't know if that term is even familiar to any of you. It's kind of come and gone, but essentially, when you're watching a broadcast and you see the graphic overlay on replays where they highlight players, they make them zoom big, they put a spot shadow on them, there's circles around their feet. That's done by a libero operator. It's not necessarily what I was interested in, but it was an opportunity I felt to get me downstairs into the truck. So I took it. I was like, if I can get down into the truck, doing that position, I wasn't live all the time, so I could really listen and learn and study the broadcast itself to learn how I would then direct if I got that opportunity. So I got down in the truck. Again, I continued doing, so I was doing home games as a libero. I was doing road games in the studio for the pre and post game show. I made it very clear that my goal was to be a director. So within 2 seasons, I ended up starting to direct. My first season, I think I directed like 50 games, and it's just gone up from there. So now I'm doing about 100 this year of the 162 games, so both home and road. So that's kind of my general background. And if you talk to anyone in my field, their paths are very similar. A lot of us started out in local news, started out as working in-house entertainment for different sporting events like FC Cincinnati or Bengals or Reds, and then take your skill set from there and move down to the game broadcast. And excuse me, I am battling a little bit of a cold. When I worked in the in-house and I was directing, that was part of it was part of the challenge for me, but also it helped me a lot because I got to bring in brand new students like yourselves that maybe had only done camera a few times here or there, or maybe had only done graphics or replay and came in, see that they have a skill set that might not be quite refined yet. But I was able to take those students, help train them for broadcast level. And then the sad part was that we would get everybody trained, and I eventually knew that they were going to move on to the game broadcast. It's just part of the process. So, that being said, I encourage all of you, if you get any opportunities to work in house entertainment, it's a great place to start out if you're looking to get into the production side. Um, So that's really it. This will be my it's like sixth season, I think, directing for We Are Now FanDuel Sportsnet. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The name keeps changing from since I worked there. It's a constant roller coaster. So we'll get into that for a little bit, but that's kind of my journey about how I got to where I am. So again, 28th season of baseball coming up. I've worked multiple jobs along the way to get to where I am. Also a mother of two kids, so I was able to do it. My oldest daughter is 21. She's actually a college student herself. So I don't know if you have any questions for that part so far about my journey. But
I've
like
got
I said, it is
one.
very similar pathway to a lot of people that
Yeah,
work in our
and
field.
I've got one question. There are really two shows going on at any game. There are two
Mhm.
shows going on. There's the one that's being broadcast out to the people at home, and then there's the internal one. And
Yes,
I've never worked over there at the Jumbotron for the Reds, but I've worked for the Bengals. And it is a totally different show internally
yes,
that's broadcast basically inside the stadium because you have music, you have the games in the middle of it, you have marketing, you have videos, you have replays, you have so many things that are internal that maybe be crazier than what goes out, on the air. So talk a little bit about the difference between broadcasting the show that goes on inside, which is
sure,
basically marketing, and the show that goes out to home that we see when we're not at the game. That's what we see
sure.
at home.
You're right in that it's two completely separate types of broadcasts. So when you're working for the in-house, your number one priority is entertainment. We're there to entertain the fans. We're there to get the fans up and doing kiss cam and flex cam and dancing and prompting them to cheer for the team while they're out on the field. It's different in that you're working mostly between innings, whereas in the TV side of it, those are commercial breaks. So it's kind of opposite of when you're working. When you're in the in-house, again, it's anything from crowd prompts to get you to clap your hands to in between innings, the sponsorships, and things that they want to get the crowd involved in. Um, it's two completely separate different things in that there are different pressures involved. Like when you're in-house, you know, if it's a close game, they want you to really engage the fans, like get them up on their feet and cheering. Whereas when you're doing the game side of it, your job is to show people at home what they would see if they were at the ballpark, as far as you're covering the game first and foremost. But then we're also trying to engage them by showing at times different crowd reactions and basically showing like, hey, this is a place that you want to be. You want to get down here and cheer for this team and have fun just like the crowd is. But, goal number one on the TV side is you show every pitch. You have to be able to tell the story of where the ball is in relation to where the base runners are. And that being said, baseball, I firmly believe, is the hardest sport to direct. As because like if you have basketball, soccer, football, if you think about it, the main action is going this way the entire time. In baseball, you've got a ball going to different fields. Is it in the infield? Is it in the outfield? Where are the base runners? Because you need the people at home to know if the ball's out in the right field corner and my runner is at first base, is he going to score? Where is he? How does he move up? And then there are things that happen outside of the play that you also have to be able to show. So for in-house, you're still shooting during the action, but you're shooting for replays. There are rules involved with the in-house that there cannot be any motion going on the video board while the pitcher is on the mound getting ready to pitch. If the batter steps out, they can, do prompts, they can flash, make noise. But as soon as that batter, technically, when they hit the dirt circle is when you're supposed to stop, everything has to freeze because it becomes a distraction for the players on the field. So all motion has to completely stop. So again, you're kind of working more in between pitches and then really entertaining during commercial breaks. Whereas on the TV side of it, you're more showing every pitch and what's going on. I can't hear you.
That's because I turned my microphone off. Okay, Leo's got a question. How do you know or decide what to say or show on TV on the Jumbotron? A lot of downtime between pitches, and has the pitch clock helped you with your job? In football and in basketball, a lot of times the in-house coordinator makes a decision whether or not to show a replay, whether or not it's going to be beneficial to the home team.
Yeah.
If it's a close play and it looks like it's a foul against one of your players, you don't show it. That's your decision. So how do you decide what to say or show on TV and on the Jumbotron? Both ways to direct.
Sure. So again, very, very different. When you are working in-house, there are rules about what you can and cannot show. Um, I have not worked in-house since 2018, so I don't know if anything has changed necessarily, but when I was working there is when the replay reviews did come into effect. So if there is a close play, the rule in-house was that you were allowed to show it on the video board one time and one time only, and it had to be in real speed. You couldn't slow things down. So basically, you couldn't be giving a home field advantage to your team by slowing things down and saying like, look, this isn't what it was. But we did have the opportunity to show it one time at real speed. So knowing that if the team sees us put something like a replay up on the video board after a close play, they get that initial look at it. But then that's also kind of our hint of, hey, you might want to take a look at it, like wink, wink. But so there are rules. Once the replay review is initiated, we as in the in-house, we were allowed to show any looks we wanted as many times as we wanted, slow motion, but all those looks had to originate from the TV broadcast. So when you're working in-house, you have your own cameras. Excuse me, there are about 5 cameras or so that you control, but you also take feeds from the TV broadcast. The TV broadcast feeds are the ones that you can show only after a replay is initiated. And the reason for that is because those cameras go up to New York for the review center. If you're working in-house and one of my camera operators had a better look that clearly was definitive, if it was, an out or safe, if New York doesn't have that same look and we're showing our look on the video board, the crowd's like, oh, that was the wrong call, and they're booing or cheering whichever way they're going. But New York doesn't have that look. So again, different rules in that once a replay is initiated, you can only show the looks that originated from the TV truck because that's what New York is basing their decision on. So you have to be very careful. We might have had some really good looks that we had to kind of hold off on. Now, on the TV side of it, you can replay as much as you want over and over. You can, rock things back and forth. Any of our looks are fine to do that with. So again, it's just a different kind of mindset when you're directing. In-house, you have to be very cautious because you could get fined or, in a lot of trouble if you showed a look that you weren't supposed to.
So just to follow up, what is the pitch clock meant to you?
So it's kind of a love-hate relationship because it's a love in that from the time I started working games back in 97, the average game times, they were just over 2 hours, 2.5 hours. A 3 hour game was long back then. As things have started, as years pass on and they start having more relief pitchers coming in the game instead of starters going late into a game, batters stepping out of the box and things, the games kept getting longer and longer and longer. A 3 hour game became a quick game, which was kind of sad. So personally, our games are shorter, which is a lot better for the mindset of the crew that are shooting the games. The bad part is that sometimes things happen so fast. Like you just have to be ready. Like when a pitcher's coming in from the bullpen, he can technically throw when there's still 20 seconds left on the clock. So you just have to kind of be a lot more on top of your game and aware, excuse me, aware of what's going on. And it's just, again, it's less time for replays. So we might have been in a much longer replay sequence before, and now we're limited to how many looks we can show because of the time in between batters or the time in between pitches. So there's a lot less time to do replays and things like that.
And my quick follow-up, now we can challenge balls and strikes. Although Reds manager Terry Francona says he's not going to do it because you're not going to do it in the regular season. But
Right.
some, I was watching games this weekend, some of the clubs are using that option to challenge balls and strikes. They do it in the minor leagues. So what will that mean? Do you have a sense yet of what that will mean to the broadcast?
They've been using it at the minor league level, and it's my understanding that it's been successful at that level. They are doing it at spring training this year as a testing phase to kind of see how it works. As Betsy said, our manager told his major league players, like, listen, this is not something we're going to be able to do this year, so we don't need the distraction. Don't even deal with it. But during the game that the Reds played their first game on Saturday, one of the players for the Cleveland Guardians, they actually did invoke the review and the call got overturned. So I see it, it's coming. I mean, it's definitely coming. It's just a matter of when and if the MLB Players Association obviously have to probably sign off on that before it can be fully, part of the game. So it might be next year, it might be 2 years. It again, it's mixed. You always want to get the calls right. That's first and foremost for the umpiring crew. But it's so hard, baseball, everything's so fast now. You got a pitch coming in at 102 miles an hour. You're going to miss some calls. So it's definitely going to change the game, but they only get two challenges per game. So it's not going to affect it so much, but it could definitely affect, an outcome of a game if it comes down to called strike three, last out and bottom of the ninth. So it's just going to depend. As far as the broadcast goes, they do have it at our spring training facility, so I'll get to see it more in person when I go out there next week. I did watch, and essentially it's just a data feed from MLB that comes in, and we already show the similar feed with the strike box and the ball coming in. It looks like a kind of animation cartoon graphic. We already have that, and we do use that as part of our broadcast as a replay look. But this is just they're going to make their decisions based off of that strike box, which all of that stuff has to be calibrated. And, it takes a lot of work setting up those things to make sure that they're accurate too. Because some people would say that they're not fully accurate depending on where the camera that's capturing that is located.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? You might want to jump in with a question.
I was just kind of curious because obviously we discussed in the beginning that there's not that many women that are acting as director. Do you feel like that kind of impacted your path in any sort of way, or is it still just like the whole you have to prove yourself, and then once you gain trust, you kind of move up?
Um, I don't know if it necessarily impacted my journey of getting into that position, but I'm not going to say that there aren't times it's challenging in my position because it's not the norm. So when I show up, especially like my home crews, everybody knows me at home, but when I travel to another city, the crews aren't familiar with me. So when I show up, there are many times that, literally will ask me, hey, is the director here or where's the director? And I'm like, oh, I'm right here, it's me. And I don't get my feelings hurt about it because again, it's just not the norm. Like, they're always like, oh, I'm sorry. But then there are times too where, I'll do a game and after the game, some of the comments might be like, oh wow, you really did a great job, or you like they were surprised. And again, I try not to get my feelings too hurt about it, but it is trending, in the other direction. More and more women are getting involved in those positions like directing, and we have a lot more female producers now in our league. On my home show, my technical director is also a female. My graphics operator is a female. So we're getting more and more women out there. It's just it unfortunately has not been the norm. So people are just a little surprised by it, but I don't let it affect me. I just still do my job the way I do it. And but yeah, as far as like my path getting to where I was, I don't know that it really held me back. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma.
Um, kind of bouncing off of that. I work at Fine Irish Media and I work in the control room mostly. I'm also from Cincinnati, so like I've been a fan of the Reds forever. Love watching the broadcast. But what would be your advice as a girl wanting to get into those higher positions in the control room, like especially for the big leagues?
I think part of what helped me the most was literally doing every position. Like as a director, I've done the score bug, I've done graphics, I've done camera, I've been a technical director. So for me, knowing how all those positions work when I'm calling a show, I have expectations of I know how long it takes for a graphic person to call up the page. I know how that machine works. So if there's like some technical issues, I can help troubleshoot. Same with the technical director. Like I know what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing just based off what the technology allows for. With cameras, I know how to shoot, so I know how to describe to my camera operators what to shoot. So for the most part, people aren't just going to be like out of college, I want to be a director and go right into it. Usually you kind of start, at the entry level positions, which are more like grips, utilities, and then work your way inside, bug, bug is the score bug, graphics, camera. And there's a little bit of a progression. What you'll find is that people kind of think they have an idea of what they want to do. And then by doing all the different positions, they learn like, oh, wow, I'm really good at this aspect. In television production, there's so many skill sets to have. Some are very technical. If you're a computer person, technical directing, that's going to be up your alley. That's not for everybody. Some people look at the switcher, oh, all the buttons, not for them. Some people are more artistic. So that would be like if you want to be a camera person or a shooter, like you come up with creative angles of how to tell stories and things. Some people are more graphically inclined as far as like if you're really good at spelling and proofreading and things, graphics might be where you want to go. I know 100% I will never be a producer. It's just not my thing. Producers, they're the ones who decide the stories to tell. They do a lot of research. I'm a live person. Like I like live, instant. I tried a few jobs as like editing and doing projects. It's not for me. I like to do live action in the moment, making decisions. Again, that's a skill set that I have that not everybody else has. So I think just not just for women in general, but for everybody, do every position because like I said, you might not know. I didn't know when I was in college that I wanted to be a director. I mean, there was one time in my life I thought I wanted to be a sports reporter. I quickly learned I'm not comfortable on camera, so that was not for me. So take every opportunity you get. Don't rule anything out because as you go, you might find something that really fits your individual skill set. For me, it was more like I was a graphic person, like good at typing and spell checking and researching. So I kind of stayed in that lane until I got into directing. I did a little bit of technical directing, which I can punch some shows, but as far as building them, that's not necessarily my thing either. But I have a good concept of how the machine works. So I know what it's capable of. I know what the operator's capable of. So as far as getting into directing, do all the positions, learn them all. I went to every training I could, even after I was a director. Like when I worked for the in-house scoreboard, we changed equipment. So we got EVS replay machines. I was never going to sit behind that machine and operate it, but I went to the training and I took a lot of notes again, so that like as a director in a leadership role, maybe there's somebody there that's a newer operator and maybe they're having issues and I can go and help them troubleshoot it. But again, also understanding how the operation of the machine works. So I'm not expecting things to happen that like that when the machine isn't capable of doing that.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? Any other questions? Jen, I know that you said that you had some videos, some things that you wanted to show?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you have actually been inside of a television truck. I know when I describe it to my family, I think they still don't really understand. Like, you're in a semi truck at at the ballpark. And it's like, yeah, so forgive me if all of you have been in one, but I'm going to show you my truck, the truck that I work in, at the Reds games, just kind of to give you an idea. And with that said, I was also going to talk about just how coverage has changed as far as like the technology in the trucks that we have. Maybe I'll start there just briefly. So it used to be that every game had two shows. You had a home team show, so the Reds are at home. We have our show, and then the visiting team. Let's say we're playing the Brewers. They would have their own separate show, two independent shows. One with their broadcasters in a different TV truck, and then ours with our broadcasters in a TV truck. So excuse me, at some point they went to what was called a dual feed. So a dual feed basically said like, hey, if we're all at the time Fox Sports Network, why do we need to have two high home cameras? Why do we need to have two center field cameras? They're shooting literally the exact same thing. So let's kind of join forces and do what's called a dual feed. So dual feeds were one truck, two shows originated out of one truck. So on one side of the production truck, you'd have the home team, and on the other side, you'd have the visiting team. Within that truck, um, you would have, there's two switcher boards. Okay. So two panels that you have two technical directors cutting on, but it's one switcher brain. So they're saving money that way in that they're buying one switcher, but having basically two panels. So they have to allocate resources. One, like, okay, the home show, you get these two Emmys and these three Kiers, and then on the dual side, you get what's left, right? So then that kind of came and went, and then they went into still a dual feed, but two separate trucks. So now when you come, for the most part, this is the way things are now. You'll have a home show truck, which is the main truck, and it's tied to what they call a VMU, which is a video mobile unit. It's like a smaller version of a truck with less things. Still one switcher sharing brains, things like that, but your production crews are in two separate places. Um, and then they've moved on to cloud, which that's more for visiting show, and I can touch on that in a little bit. But that being said, let me see if I can get it going here. I will show you essentially what the truck situation looks like. Okay, let me, can you see that okay?
Yep. Yeah, we can see your file.
Okay, so you see like a truck with a sunset and things. Let me
Yeah,
try to do,
but we see all of the
okay.
shots that you have in the file, and then yeah, we see the truck over on the right-hand side. Yeah.
Okay, now do you see it full size?
No, not yet.
Oh,
It's
because on
still
my
bigger than
screen
everybody
it's,
else, but it's over there on the side. But we can see it. It's the semi and it's got the sunset in the back and all that.
yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
how to make it because on my side I'm looking at it looks like it's full screen.
Okay.
So I don't know how to. All right. Well, if you can see it, so that essentially is the TV truck, right? So that's what it looks like from the outside. It drives across the country to get from, A to B. Um, just wanted to show you that. So the next, so this, if you can see it, and I apologize if you can't, I'm not sure why it doesn't look full screen on yours, but this is a two truck configuration. So this would be like the truck on the left is most likely the visit show, or sorry, that would be the home show because see how it expands out, it's bigger. So the truck on the left would be where the home show broadcast would be originating from, and the truck on the right would be the visit show. So that's kind of what I show up to most of the time when I'm doing a game. So two separate trucks. This is the VMU. So this is the one we currently have. So this is smaller than the last slide I showed you. They're trying to make things more affordable. And so this VMU, we call it like a baby truck. It's a little bit smaller version, but it still has everything that the visit show needs. And this is our VMU that our visit shows use, and it's the newest of the fleet that Mobile TV Group has. So this is the basically the layout inside that truck. So from outside the truck, when you go in, um, this is how everything is laid out. So you've got the production side here, which is where your producer, director, your technical director sits here. In this back row, these are where my graphics operators sit. Right here is where my score op, bug op would sit. You go into another room. This is where all of my replay operators sit. And our truck is a little unique in that one of the visit show replay operators sits in our truck. And then the visit graphics operators, if they're traveling, would also be in our truck. Then there's an engineering queue, and then that's where the guys who shade the cameras would be located. This is what the inside of the production side looks like. So when I come in, I sit right here in this middle chair. And basically, I have to lay out this monitor wall. What sources do I want to look at? Where do I want them allocated? Back here is where our graphics op would sit, and this is where our bug operator would sit. This is a view of the audio booth inside the truck, of our truck. This is a view of the tape room. So front row is all of my home show tape ops. Back row, this is going to be visiting graphics if they travel one. And over here is the visiting replay operator. This is where the engineers sit and shade cameras. Both the home show and the visit show engineers sit in here in the home show truck. And again, this is just another outside view of the truck, just showing that basically these semis can pull into the arenas. Some places we go, they're parked outside. At Great American, this is actually a picture that was taken at the Columbus Blue Jackets. They pull those semis and park them inside. So when I'm at the Reds, our truck is in the belly of the stadium. We are located inside. This was a layout of that little VMU that I showed you. So the visiting show you can see is much smaller. So over here, they've got their technical director. Depending on who they travel, we only travel one person. So if this were me, it would be just me, the director, my technical director, an audio operator, and then the engineer. My video person is in the other truck, and my graphics person would be in the other truck. This is the audio booth for that little small truck, just to kind of show you it's a lot different size, it's a lot smaller. Oh, excuse me. That picture's really small, but that is the production side of the VMU. And then I can come back to this later, but while I have it up, I'll mention it. So this looks very similar to something that you would find in a truck. This is actually at a good friend of mine's basement. So he works NFL, and a lot of positions are now going remote. So he gets shipped this package for CBS NFL. And he sets it up at his house for the entire season. And, depending on what game he's working that week, this is literally he goes downstairs to his basement and operates a replay machine. You can see he's got a controller. The controller remotes into the truck so that he has access. This is a KP panel. So this is his headset, just like he would have in a truck. And all of these monitors are multi-view, built-in multi-view, so he can see all of the feeds. But I just wanted to show you that just to kind of give you an idea that things are going remote. So that's picture wise all I have to show you. Hopefully you could see them good enough.
Yeah, and you talked about remote. Thanks to COVID, we started to get used to the broadcast team being remote. Now most everybody, if not everybody, is back in the booth on site. But do you see perhaps in the future that you will be at home or you will be at the FanDuel studio broadcasting the Reds when they're out on the West Coast?
So you're right in that COVID kind of sped up. I think it's headed there eventually. We were forced to do it during 2020 for 60 games and then again in 2021. A couple teams tried to continue it in 2022, and it wasn't successful. I think the Athletics were one of the teams that tried to continue it.
Mhm.
Um, right now, with the technology, you have a delay. So what you see at the ballpark, when the broadcasters would see it remotely wherever they were, whether it be at home or at the studio, it might be 2 seconds later. And in baseball, 2 seconds is an eternity.
Yeah.
Um, and so I do know that there are some sports like college basketball and things where the announcers are doing it from their home. They get a very similar setup to like what I just showed you, but with a multi-viewer so that they can see the different cameras. But there are some that are calling it from home, but that's the challenge. I think at least for now, announcers will continue to be on site. Like they feel so detached when they're not at the game. When they're in the booths, they're looking out a window out the field. They're going to see things that they wouldn't be able to see on the monitors. So I don't know for Major League Baseball that announcing will go that way, but we are doing a lot more things remotely. Our road games have gone to what I referred to earlier as a cloud. Basically, things are done all over IP address. So our network specifically, when we travel, we are only traveling one production person, which is typically the director, myself, whereas we used to travel director and the producer and a graphics operator and a replay operator.
Mm.
And then all the other positions, like obviously cameras and graphics and scorebug, those were hired locals, depending on what city we're going to. Now, at our studio in Cincinnati, where we were doing just only pre and post game show, we are doing cloud games from there. So if I'm on site directing, my producer is actually back in Cincinnati. My lead replay operator is back in Cincinnati. My scorebox operator is back in Cincinnati, and my graphics operator is back in Cincinnati. And that's called a cloud production. Um, the the pros and the cons, the pros are it saves the company money. They're not traveling for people anymore. They don't have to put up for people in hotels and pay all of our expenses while we're on the road. The cons is same thing. Depending on where you are, you have at least a 2 second delay. So you might notice that, on the score bug, it doesn't change right away. Or a camera shot, if the director is back remotely, might be a tad bit late. And again, in baseball, it's they've got it down now, I would say closer to 1 second, but depending on what market you're in, like when we go to Toronto, it can be longer. And if I'm trying to direct a game, if you think about it, the pitch comes, they put it in play. If I'm on a 1 or 2 second delay, by the time I see it remotely, it's already through the infield. So by the time I cut to that camera, it's already you don't even know where, like, was it a ground ball? Was it a line drive? And the same thing when I'm talking to my camera operators when I'm remotely, like they might have a shot that I see that I like. And by the time I see it and I hit take, they're already panning and moving off, but I didn't see that because of the delay. So you're going to see a lot more of those kind of little, excuse me, little small mistakes like cameras panning that shouldn't be panning, or they're starting to zoom when you're taking it. So for the most part, our local region, we've decided that traveling the director for baseball at least is the best because you're in real time calling the shots as they happen. But there will be times where I will be back in Cincinnati calling the games and my producer will be traveling. It also makes it a challenge because typically director and producer, we sit together. We do a lot of nonverbal communication. You cannot do that when you're not sitting together. So it makes it hard. Like while I'm calling a game, I can look at my producer and point or gesture to something and he knows what I'm talking about. We don't have that. And so things get lost in communication too, when we're doing things remotely like that.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, let's talk about rights without getting too deep into the weeds because it's going to
Yeah.
change and who knows what. But as I mentioned it, so many of these regions were Fox Sports something, Fox Sports Ohio, Fox Sports Cincinnati, Fox Sports Chicago. Before that, it was Sports Channel Ohio, Sports Channel Chicago. The different owners come in, and it was Bally for the longest time. Just for a second, the Reds were going to have MLB take over, and now FanDuel has stepped up. How does that affect you? Or does it affect you? You have a job to get that game on the air. Does it really matter whose name is on that paycheck?
It does matter.